So here's the bottom panel that I'm going to do that's going to hold the Bluetooth controller. The bottom panel is actually 2 3/8 inches wide and 5 1/4 inches long. So here's the cut points. This outer 1/8 inch here just represents the panels that are going to be there, so it needs to fit inside those panels. So these are the cut points on these outer dots right here, and that'll give us a perfect size panel with this centered right. So I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to cut the oval out, the oval hole for that. I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so I have the panel cut out at 5 1/4 inches. I've also cut the oval out, and what you're going to basically see on the underside of the panel is just this part of the controller, and there'll be 4 little screws, boom, 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 here holding it in. So I've gone ahead and I've traced this panel out using this template onto a piece of just our 1/8 inch hardboard here. Getting ready to cut that out using one of the flat sides already, so I have to do a minimum of cutting. So I'll just cut this oval out and cut the outside out, and I'll be right back with that. Okay, so here's the bottom panel cut out. As you can see, the oval's already cut out. I went ahead and sanded it down nice and kind of rounded off the edges nice. Let's see how it fits. And it fits perfectly. So we got our 1/8 inch there, and it's gonna fit right in there. We'll put a hole here, screw hole here to hold it in, and then here's the actual controller. Here's gonna be how it looks once I have this thing screwed in properly. I need to basically next I need to position it in there and do the 4 holes through it, drill the 4 little holes through it that are going to hold it in there. We're going to run screws here, 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 and here up through the bottom, but we're actually going to use the little pre-built-in posts that I pointed out on video 1 to hold that in, and then that's going to be the bottom panel, and that's where your controls are going to be. These 2 buttons are the flipper buttons. This is going to pull back for your plunger, and then the start is one of these 2 buttons, but it's going in pretty good so far. So here is the Bluetooth device installed, dry run install, but it came out. I'm really happy with how it came out. Basically just held it on top of there and drilled holes through these little posts, hold the other side of the case, ran screws right up through the center. You can see them sticking through there, and it works like a dream. Keeps the buttons exposed here, so you can reach right in there and get them. Let's see how it looks. Fits to the underside of the cab. Get my wire down there. But you can see how it fits really nicely right to the underside of the cab. And there's our bottom panel done. You know, right flipper button, left flipper button. Here's how the board looks inside the cab. Plenty of room inside the cab. So I'm really happy with that. Now it's just the front panel and the back panel, front panel. Okay, so we've got our bottom panel installed, and it's installed very nicely, very solid. Buttons are solid. I actually even tested this last night on Pinball Arcade and inside the cab and everything, and it works great. However, we got this one little mountain left to climb, I guess, which is the charging port. Okay, so there's no real way to access it once it's in. So what I'm going to do is use one of these little micro USB extension cables. So it's got the male end here, which will plug in here, and then the female end, I'm going to run it up and have it sitting on top of one of the ports and make a hole in the back panel, and it will become the new charging port. So you'll never have to like take it apart to charge it or anything. So here's basically how that's going to look. I've taken one of these charging ports and I've just put a little bit of twist tie on the end of it to get the cord wrapped around, because what we're going to have to do here is, as you can see, it sits in there and it obviously is going to run right into the support, this bottom support bar. Okay, so inevitably, as I almost always do with every project, I have to at some point whip out the Dremel. And what I'm going to do is basically, I've drawn out, you can see here, I've looked at the angle. I basically held it up to the board, and then I traced the angle that I'm going to need to basically route out with the Dremel to allow this stupid little ditty to fit in here. And then once it's routed out of there, it'll sit there with inside of that, and then the back panel will cover it, so you won't be able to see the cord. And then the charging port will be, there'll be a hole in the back panel, and the charging port will be resident right here as the new charging port for it. Okay, so usually I always have to Dremel something out on almost every glow cap that I build, but this is not a hard deal. As you can see, there's still going to be cross member piece across this top, so it'll have plenty of structural integrity along with this and this, you know. But I'm going to go ahead and do that and see if I can get a fit on that real quick. Okay, so after a little fun with the Dremel, I've got a effective little trench cut out, kind of along the lines that I traced out. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to work. This is all going to be hidden. So theoretically now, I should be able to place this panel in, and how about that? And yeah, it fits in there fine. The back panel will cover that up and try to shove it in. And so here's the new charging port, right? So this can stay permanently screwed in here, and you won't ever have to really remove it. And if, let's say I decide to change the for instance, let's say I try hooking up the two LEDs and I don't feel it's bright enough, I can always just Velcro a 9-volt rechargeable to the bottom of the phone. And again, I'm going to have it to where the phone can flip up, almost like a real pinball machine. You'll be able to flip up the phone or whatever and just pull it out of there and replace the rechargeable battery. But again, I'm going to try to run the LEDs off there and see how long they last and how bright they are. Anyway, this becomes the new charging port, so it's actually going to come and work around the board there, and it's going to end up being right here. And so what I'll do is I'll just cut a little hole in the back panel, and this will stick partially through the back panel. I'll also epoxy it down to this piece of wood, and I'll use our wood poplar stock to make a couple of spacers, that basically a small one here and then a longer one that goes across the top here, and I will sandwich this charger in there. And the back panel will go in there, and it'll be nice and stable, and you can just plug and unplug here to charge the device on the bottom. Alright, now that the bottom panel is done, time to do the front panel and the back panel. I'm going to show you a real easy shortcut way that I've used for a long time for building stuff. But for the panels, really, you almost don't even need the template. All you really have to do is cut yourself a piece of the hardboard panel. And what I do is I just hold it up to one side. You can see where the edge comes up to it. And with a little thin mechanical pencil, you just make your mark. And then you just move the piece up. Make your mark on the bottom. And you've got your two cut lines there. And you just draw your cut line there. Of course, I break the lead on the pencil. Always use a mechanical pencil because the lead is really small and thin, and you can make accurate lines. And anything thicker, I mean, when you're building this small, inevitably, if you were to just cut out and use the templates, maybe they would be off by a millimeter, a half millimeter. I mean, by doing it this way, you're actually working with whatever shape the cab is. I mean, it looks square to me, but I mean, maybe it's not exactly square. By doing it this way, you're creating a panel that fits exactly custom to the shape of your cabinet, instead of just thinking that you're perfectly square or whatever. So the same thing for the front panel, same thing for the bottom. You can just make your marks and then trace out the edge or whatever. So I'll be back when I have those two cut out, and then what we'll do is we'll trace a line on the inside of this panel to indicate where the top of that support is, and then I'll use that as a guide to cut my hole out for the charger, and I'll use the charger itself to trace the pattern onto the hardboard so it has a pretty snug fit. Okay, so now I've got the back panel piece done, doing it the way I just described. And as you can see, it ends up being a really accurate fit, to where it snaps in there and actually fits in there nice and tight. You might need to do a couple of swipes on the sandpaper, but it's always better to have just a little bit more than have it be not enough. You know, that way it fits in there perfectly tight and it's perfectly flush, and it's really nice. So now it's time to cut the holes that need to be in this thing. So we're gonna have a screw here and one up here. And again, the way I get this, and then we're going to cut the hole for the little charger. So what I'm going to do first is kind of determine where I need to draw a line so I can cut the hole. So again, using the same method as before, using this to find the edge of here so I can mark a line to this side. So that tells me where the base piece starts, and what I want to do is drill my hole for the holes for the charger piece there. I'm gonna go ahead and mark for this hole right here, because this is going to be covering that, so it needs to have a hole as well. So I'm going to fit the piece back in there, but just underneath the hole. and then we can just kind of eyeball it where the hole needs to be, 1/4 of an inch hole. So you can look at this space up here and look at the location of it and get yourself a hole drilled there like that. Okay, and for the other hole for the charger, I'll just grab a spare one here. And I'll kind of determine where I want it, and I'll use the charger itself and mechanical pencil with real thin lead. I buy these by the box full though. I use cheap ones because I always go through so many and throw them away. Like $3, you can get a dozen of them in a box. And I'm just gonna line the charger piece up here and trace it real quick. Just above that line, so, and then holding it down with one hand. That way we can get a nice tight fit through the thing. Kind of holding it steady so you can just mark the cut point. Alright. There you go. So I've got the template for all my holes now, and I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole through there and then work the rest of that square out on the scroll saw. So I mean, the scroll saw is just used for so many things, but anyway, I'll be back as soon as that's done. Okay, I've got my front panel cut out in the same manner, and here's how I'm going to do the spacing for the charger. Okay, so as you can see, using the same method. I'm not really even using the template because this is going to be more accurate. I've traced lines out, and I'm going to cut this center part out so I can plug the charger in, and then I'm going to just do little holes here for the speakers that are right there, and you can see that I've marked them, and just again using the edge of the piece to make the lines, so I'll know that I'm going to be basically having enough space, because the charger for these old iPhone 4s is monstrous, but this way it'll give me a really accurate assessment of where everything is, and I'll be able to make it look right. And then it's all going to be black anyway with graphics, so you'll really barely even be able to see that, but I'm going to do that real quick, and then both of our panels will be essentially done. Okay, so here's how that ends up looking. Fairly clean. The lockdown bar is going to cover that top part, and all this right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use I'm going to cut strips of the popsicle stick out, and I'm going to plane the edges down on the belt center to where they're just micro thin pieces, and I'm going to shim this phone in so it sits in there tight. And then let me show you the back panel. So here's the back panel done. So you can see how this one snaps in. So you can see how our holes lined up for the little toothpick. You can see right through there to the other side now. And then there's our hole for the charger. Let's see if I can fit that sucker in. And the stability of the charger is going to come from the mount. It's just going to kind of stick through this hole. But by tracing it out on the edge, you can get it pretty darn accurate and just have it sticking through there a little ways. So you know, just straighten it out a little bit, but yeah, there it is. That's how it's going to pretty much look. There'll be a little micro screw. I use these teeny tiny little brass screws for a lot of the stuff. They're gonna hold the back panel in on the head. They're gonna screw in here. You could also just glue this panel in as well, because it's going to be permanent. The legs are going to come over the top of it, and so, but you got to be sure that everything's worked out solid. As long as your hole here for the power is right, and you've got this mounted where you want it, you'll be fine. So after this, it's going to be shimming the piece in, which I'm going to not even do a video on. I mean, it's just going to be a couple of thin pieces shoved in here, and I kind of have to custom sand those, and then, you know, make sure the phone fits in tight, and then glue them in, and possibly do a little bit more sanding or whatever. And then I'll just make a bracket for these, for this to hold this in. So I'll basically cut little pieces of this wood here, you know, that run the length, and then that'll kind of sandwich this thing in real tight. I'll epoxy the whole thing in. And if I ever need to replace it, I could take the back off and I can unplug it from this thing or whatever, if this unit ever goes bad or this battery goes bad or whatever. I can just rip it out of there and replace it. But I mean, there we go. Panels done. The next video is going to be on doing the plexi panels for the head, and then I'll probably throw the legs into that video too. From there, it's going to be just painting, well, sanding down the whole thing, primering, and then painting, and then a clear coat after that, which is pretty simple process. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that process is kind of allow, you know, by having painted surface and clear coat on the edge, if you ever want to, let's say someday you want to peel the decals off and change the whole theme of the thing to a different belly cap or whatever, you could do that. But I mean, it's just always something that I do. So the legs installation will be like the last thing we do. We'll even get the stickers on and the little kind of simulated aluminum trim pieces and everything. So it's going to be kind of working out final stuff from now on. I'll have to wire up once we're painted and everything. I'll do the graphics for the headpiece, cut those out, apply all the graphics, and then I'll actually wire up the electric to the LEDs and everything, and then we'll be really close after that. So I went ahead out of curiosity and just test fitted everything in. I've got the head held on with just a screw from underneath here temporarily. That's also going to act as a backup screw once we have it glued on. But there's the back panel screwed on. You can see how the charger is going to look when I haven't done the brackets yet. I'm just kind of doing a dry run with all the panels there. I'll test the Bluetooth device on it right now and see how it does, if it does anything here. You do have to use with the app a certain amount of touch screen still, like to start it, to initially get it in there. But once it loads and you're in there, then you can start using your Bluetooth. So let's see if the start button works. Okay, so I'm using completely all the Bluetooth controls now. Okay, so it's doing really nicely. You could, you know, oh shit, I lost my phone, but you could see how your fingers just access the bars real quick. I had it taped in there, but so it's working the way I want it to. Also, you can still use the screen controls. So if you just want to swipe back to do your plunger, or even you could still potentially do the flippers this way if you wanted, but I'm a button guy. So anyway, there's the dry run. From here I'll just finish the brackets. I'll shim this thing in, and then we'll finish off the head plexi, and from there it's painting, doing the legs. I'll probably do the crossbar piece with the legs video, and we're going to be done with this thing pretty quickly now.